Brian Cohee Jr. seemed like any other teenager, quiet, unremarkable, blending into the crowd at school and at home. But beneath this ordinary exterior, Brian hid a chilling secret, a growing obsession with death and the macabre. He lived two lives, one for the world and one in darkness. His unassuming facade was his greatest camouflage, hiding the monster within, until his worlds violently collided. Grand Junction, Colorado is a city known for its breathtaking beauty, friendly faces, and a strong sense of safety. That's why the murder of Frank Harlan by a local teenager was so shocking. The crime shattered the city's sense of security, leaving residents reeling and searching for answers. Grand Junction was forever changed, its innocence lost, and its community left to heal. Living on the streets meant constant danger for Frank Harlan. Nights under the 5th Street Bridge offered little safety from the cold, or from others. He was a man stripped to essentials, often invisible, yet deserving of dignity. Frank's tragic end reminds us, those on the margins are human and must be seen. Brian Cohee Jr.'s meeting with Frank Harlan was no accident. It was a hunt. Brian stalked the streets of Grand Junction searching for a vulnerable target. On a cold February night, he found Frank, alone near the 5th Street Bridge. Their tragic intersection was the result of dark obsession and chilling intent. On a cold February night, Frank Harlan sought shelter under the 5th Street Bridge. Brian Cohee Jr., hunting in his red sedan, offered Frank kindness, a ride, a promise. Frank accepted, entering Brian's car and sealing his fate. The ordinary house on Birch Avenue became the scene of a chilling deception. Brian led Frank Harlan into his bedroom, his private sanctuary, now a stage for horror. Among the clutter and animal bones, Brian's dark fantasy became reality. The room, once a place of rest, was transformed into a slaughterhouse. As the door closed, innocence vanished, replaced by chilling intent. The murder of Frank Harlan was only the beginning. What followed was a deliberate, methodical act of desecration. Brian Cohee Jr. dismembered the body, storing remains in plastic bags and keeping trophies as proof of his power. For nearly 2 weeks, the house on Birch Avenue hid the chilling evidence of his crime. After the murder of Frank Harlan, Brian Cohee Jr. returned to his daily life with chilling composure. He attended classes, worked his job, and ate dinner with his parents, hiding a horrific secret just feet away. His calm was absolute, until the everyday concern of his parents threatened to unravel everything. As the days passed, a sense of unease began to grow within the Cohee household. While Brian maintained his calm exterior, the physical evidence of his crime was becoming harder to ignore. A foul, persistent odor began to emanate from his bedroom, a smell that could not be entirely masked by sprays and air fresheners. Terry Cohee, Brian's mother, became increasingly concerned. It was a smell she couldn't quite identify, but it was deeply unsettling. A mother's intuition is a powerful force, and Terry's was telling her that something was seriously wrong. She and her husband, Brian Sr., began to question their son, but his explanations were evasive and unsatisfying. The parents' concern was not initially about murder. Such a thought would have been unimaginable. They likely worried about more mundane, though still serious possibilities. Was their son using drugs? Had an animal gotten into the house and died in the walls? Was he living in unhygienic conditions? They decided they needed to investigate the source of the smell themselves. Their son's privacy was important, but their concern for his well-being, and the increasingly unpleasant state of their home, took precedence. They were parents worried about their child, unaware they were on the verge of uncovering a nightmare. On March 10, 2021, nearly 2 weeks after the murder, Terry and Brian Sr. decided to clean their son's room while he was out of the house. Their dread grew as they entered the room and were hit with the full force of the smell. It was strong, organic, and undeniably the smell of decay. As they began to clean, they traced the source of the odor to Brian's closet. Tucked away inside, they found several tightly sealed plastic bags. The weight and contents were immediately alarming. It was in this moment that their parental concern began to curdle into sheer terror. The discovery was a slow, dawning horror. They were not prepared for what they were about to find, but they knew it was something terrible. It was Brian Sr. who made the definitive, grisly discovery. Pushed back into a crawl space accessible from the closet was a backpack. It was heavy, far too heavy for books. With a sense of mounting dread, he opened it. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a human head. The nightmare had become real. The unimaginable had happened right under their roof. The source of the smell was not a dead animal, it was a dead person. In shock and grief, Terry and Brian Cohee Sr. made a choice that would change everything. They dialed 911, reporting the unthinkable discovery in their son's room. Turning in their own child was an act of immense courage and sacrifice. Their call set the investigation in motion, forever altering their family, and the city of Grand Junction. With the police now swarming his home, Brian Cohee Jr.'s world of secrecy came crashing down. He was located shortly after the 911 call. The confrontation was not dramatic. He was simply found, his time as a free man over. When taken into custody, his facade crumbled. He gave a chilling and detailed confession. He spoke without emotion, admitting everything. His confession was a guided tour through the mind of a killer. It left the seasoned investigators speechless. Brian's own words sealed his fate. The confrontation revealed a cold, calculating killer. The crime had been discovered and the killer had confessed. The second act of this tragedy was over, setting the stage for the legal and psychological reckoning to come. Investigators entered the Cohee family home on Birch Avenue expecting normalcy, yet found horror. Brian's bedroom, cluttered and ordinary, hid evidence of a savage crime. The air was thick with the scent of decomposition. Forensic teams uncovered animal skulls, plastic bags, and preserved remains, chilling trophies. The house became a silent witness to a meticulously planned, brutal act. While the physical evidence at the crime scene was damning, the most intimate look into Brian Cohee Jr.'s mind came from his digital devices. In today's world, our phones and computers are, kind of like extensions of our thoughts, and Brian's were a virtual tomb of dark secrets. Investigators from the Grand Junction Police Department and the FBI executed a search warrant for his electronics, seizing his computer, smartphone, and other devices. What they uncovered was a meticulously curated archive of his obsession with death and violence. His search history was a roadmap of his descent, filled with queries about serial killers, human decomposition, methods of dismemberment, and how to get away with murder. The digital forensics team worked for weeks, painstakingly recovering deleted files, browser histories, and communications. They found that Brian was not just a passive consumer of violent content, he was an active researcher. He had downloaded manuals on anatomy and forensic pathology, studying the human body with the cold curiosity of a surgeon. He had bookmarked articles about infamous killers like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer, learning from their methods and their mistakes. This was not the idle curiosity of a teenager interested in true crime. This was the dedicated study of a student preparing for a final exam, with murder being the subject. Perhaps the most chilling discovery was the vast collection of photos and videos he had taken himself. This included not only the disturbing images of Frank Harlan's dismembered body, but also countless pictures of dead animals in various states of decay. He had created a personal gallery of death, a visual diary of his morbid fascination. This photographic evidence demonstrated a long-term, escalating pattern of behavior. It showed a progression from observing death to actively seeking it out and documenting it. His devices were not just tools, they were his co-conspirators, silent partners that held the complete, unvarnished record of his dark journey. The digital evidence was a prosecutor's dream and a defense attorney's nightmare. It provided a clear and undeniable window into his premeditation and his state of mind. It showed that the murder of Frank Harlan was not an impulsive act or a moment of madness. It was the calculated culmination of years of fantasy, research, and planning. Brian Cohee Jr. had used the internet to build his own private curriculum of killing, and his computer and phone held all the lesson plans. The digital tomb he had so carefully constructed had now become the primary evidence that would be used to bury him in a court of law. Among the terabytes of data recovered from Brian Cohee Jr.'s devices, the most shocking evidence were his own audio and video recordings. Calmly, he described the murder, documenting every detail with chilling detachment. These files became the ultimate trophy, his own confession, leaving no doubt about his guilt. The narrative he created to glorify his actions became the very tool that ensured his conviction. Brian Cohee Jr. is a rare and chilling type of murderer, the thrill killer. Unlike most killers, he sought excitement, not revenge or gain. For him, the act itself was the goal, a rush of power and control. His victim was simply a prop, and the crime, a way to satisfy his dark curiosity. This is the essence of a thrill kill, murder for the sake of the experience, not out of anger or hate. The mind of a thrill killer is that of a predator. Once they taste blood, they rarely stop on their own. The case of Brian Cohee Jr. reignites the age-old debate: nature or nurture? Was he born with a brain wired for violence or shaped by his environment? Despite a stable home, Brian's digital life revealed a deep immersion in violent media. Perhaps it was a tragic mix of biology and experience, no easy answers, only disturbing questions. Brian Cohee Jr.'s defense pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, setting the stage for a dramatic battle of experts. Psychologists argued he was lost in a fantasy world, while the prosecution claimed he was a calculating psychopath. The jury faced a difficult choice: was Brian truly insane or simply evil? Dr. Chris Mohanty, a renowned forensic psychologist, assessed Brian Cohee Jr. and found him legally sane, not insane. He highlighted Brian's planning, organization, and attempts to conceal his crime as evidence of guilt and awareness. Dr. Mohanty concluded Brian was a cold, remorseless predator, fully responsible for his actions. The prosecution, led by the Mesa County District Attorney's Office, built its case on a simple, powerful theme. Brian Cohee Jr.'s actions were not the product of madness, but of a calculated and profound evil. They systematically presented the mountain of evidence they had gathered, weaving it into a narrative that left little room for doubt. Their strategy was to walk the jury through Brian's journey, from his early morbid fascinations to the meticulous planning and brutal execution of the murder. They aimed to show that every step he took was deliberate, rational, and goal-oriented, the very antithesis of an insanity defense. The prosecutors used Brian's own words as their most potent weapon. They played the chilling audio recordings of the murder for the jury, forcing them to listen to the calm, steady voice of a young man narrating the death of his victim. They showed the photographs and videos he had taken of the dismemberment, displaying his pride and lack of remorse for all to see. They presented his detailed confession, where he calmly explained his motive of pure curiosity. This direct evidence was far more powerful than any expert opinion, as it allowed the jury to see the crime through the killer's own eyes and judge his state of mind for themselves. The prosecution team effectively framed the defense's arguments as a desperate attempt to excuse the inexcusable. They acknowledged that Brian was a deeply disturbed individual, but drew a sharp legal distinction between being disturbed and being legally insane. They argued that having a personality disorder, even a severe one like psychopathy, does not negate criminal responsibility. Their cross-examination of the defense's expert witnesses was sharp and focused, highlighting inconsistencies in their analyses and contrasting their theories with the hard, factual evidence of Brian's methodical behavior. They painted the insanity defense as a convenient fiction, a story crafted after the fact to avoid the consequences of a horrific choice. In their closing arguments, the prosecution summarized their case with devastating clarity. They reminded the jury of Frank Harlan, the vulnerable, elderly man who was senselessly murdered simply to satisfy a teenager's morbid curiosity. They replayed the defendant's cold words and displayed his proud, grotesque images. They argued that Brian Cohee Jr. was not a passenger on a journey into madness, but the pilot. He was in control, he made the choices, and he knew exactly what he was doing. They asked the jury to reject the excuses and to hold him accountable for an act of calculated, remorseless, and undeniable evil. One of the most chilling theories in the Brian Cohee Jr. case is that he was on the verge of becoming a serial killer. His escalating obsession with death, animal cruelty, and the trophies he kept mirror the classic patterns of infamous murderers. Experts believe, had his parents not intervened, Brian's first kill would not have been his last. Grand Junction was spared by chance. Brian Cohee Jr.'s case raises chilling questions about digital desensitization. Immersed in graphic online content and crime forums, he found validation and endless material for his dark curiosity. For most, the internet is harmless, but for someone already predisposed, it can become a toolkit, offering knowledge, community, and the emotional numbness needed to cross the line. The impact of Brian Cohee Jr.'s crime on the community of Grand Junction was not fleeting. It left deep and enduring scars on the city's collective psyche. The initial shock and horror eventually gave way to a more persistent and unsettling feeling of vulnerability. This was a place that prided itself on its small-town feel and sense of safety, an illusion that was irrevocably shattered. The knowledge that such a monstrous act was planned and committed by a local teenager, in an ordinary suburban home, created a lingering sense of unease. It forced residents to confront the uncomfortable truth that evil is not always an external threat, but can grow silently and invisibly within the heart of a community. This breach of trust had a tangible effect on daily life. Neighbors began to look at each other with a hint of suspicion. Parents became more anxious about their children's friends and online activities, suddenly aware of the hidden worlds that might exist behind closed bedroom doors. The case became a cautionary tale, a dark piece of local lore that fundamentally altered the way people felt about their own safety. The freedom and openness that had once characterized the community were replaced by a new, more cautious approach to life. The name Brian Cohee Jr. became synonymous with the loss of innocence for an entire city. The community's reaction was also one of profound and complex grief. There was, of course, immense sadness for the victim, Frank Harlan, whose tragic life and brutal death became a symbol of societal neglect. But there was also a strange, complicated sorrow for the Cohee family, who were seen by many as secondary victims of their son's crime. Their decision to turn him in was widely regarded as heroic, but it came at an unimaginable personal cost. The community grappled with how to support a family whose son had inflicted so much pain, a testament to the tangled and devastating emotional fallout of the case. Years after the trial, the case continues to cast a long shadow over Grand Junction. It is a permanent part of the city's history, a reference point for the moment when the illusion of perfect safety was broken. The enduring impact is a testament to how a single act of violence can ripple outward, touching countless lives and fundamentally changing the character of a place. The scars left by Brian Cohee Jr. are a reminder that the fabric of a community is fragile, and that the trust and security that bind it together, once torn, can never be perfectly mended. Beyond the public horror and legal drama, the Brian Cohee Jr. case contains a private tragedy of almost unimaginable proportions, the story of his parents, Terry and Brian Sr. Their experience represents every parent's worst nightmare magnified 1,000 times over. They did not just learn that their son was a killer, they were the ones who discovered the evidence of his crime. They were confronted with the monstrous reality of his actions in the most direct and visceral way possible. Their grief is a complex tapestry woven with threads of shock, betrayal, sorrow, and a love for the child they thought they knew, now irrevocably lost to them. The community and media speculation often and unfairly turns to the parents in cases like this. Did they miss the signs? Could they have done more? While some may have cast blame, the overwhelming sentiment in the community was one of deep sympathy. The Cohees were by all accounts loving and supportive parents who provided their son with a stable home. They were aware of his morbid interests but, like any parent, could not have conceived of the violent potential they represented. Their story is a heartbreaking illustration of the fact that even the most dedicated parenting cannot always penetrate the secret world of a deeply disturbed mind. Their decision to call 911 was an act of profound moral courage, but it placed them in an impossible position. In that moment, they had to choose between their duty as citizens and their instinct to protect their child. By choosing to do the right thing, they effectively condemned their own son to a life in prison and unleashed a public firestorm upon their family. They lost their son not once but twice, first to the dark pathology that consumed him, and second to the justice system. Their grief is compounded by the public nature of their tragedy, forced to mourn under the harsh glare of the media spotlight. The lasting impact on the Cohee family is a life sentence of its own. They must live with the knowledge of what their son did, with the what-ifs and the unanswered questions that will likely haunt them forever. They are a family shattered by a crime they did not commit, left to navigate a world that will forever associate their name with a horrific act of violence. Their story is a powerful and sobering reminder that the ripples of a murder spread far beyond the victim, devastating the lives of those closest to the perpetrator and leaving a legacy of unspeakable, unending grief. The murder of Frank Harlan cast a harsh spotlight on the plight of the homeless in Grand Junction. Frank was targeted because of his circumstances, exposing the vulnerability of the marginalized. His death forced the community to see him as a person, not just a homeless man. It sparked a necessary conversation about caring for the most vulnerable. Frank Harlan became a symbol of the unseen, prompting a renewed commitment to visibility and support. The Brian Cohee Jr. case, while a tragedy, also left a significant and lasting impact on law enforcement practices, particularly in the realm of digital forensics. The investigation served as a powerful case study in the critical importance of a suspect's digital footprint. While the physical evidence was damning, it was the data extracted from Brian's phone and computer that provided an undeniable first-person account of his premeditation, motive, and state of mind. The audio recordings, search histories, and photographic evidence he created himself became the unshakable foundation of the prosecution's case, effectively making him the star witness against himself. For the Grand Junction Police Department and the FBI agents who assisted, the case reinforced the need for cutting-edge digital forensic tools and expertise. It highlighted that in modern crime the most revealing clues are often not found at the physical crime scene but within the circuits and memory chips of electronic devices. The ability to recover deleted files, trace online activity, and analyze metadata is no longer a niche specialty but a fundamental component of homicide investigations. The Cohee case became a textbook example of how to build an ironclad case by meticulously following the digital breadcrumbs left by a perpetrator. The case also provided law enforcement with a chilling real-world profile of a modern thrill killer. Brian's methodical use of the internet for research and his subsequent documentation of the crime offered valuable if disturbing insights into the psychology and behavior of this rare type of offender. This information is invaluable for training investigators and profilers to recognize potential warning signs and patterns in future cases. Understanding how a young person can use readily available technology to educate themselves in the art of murder is crucial for developing strategies to prevent similar tragedies from occurring. Furthermore, the case had a profound impact on the officers involved, many of whom had never encountered a crime of such cold, calculated brutality, especially from such a young perpetrator. The emotional toll of processing a scene of dismemberment and listening to the killer's calm confession is immense. The legacy of the case within law enforcement is a dual one. It was a triumph for investigative procedure and digital forensics, proving the effectiveness of modern policing techniques. But it was also a sobering, traumatic encounter with the depths of human depravity, a grim reminder of the darkness that officers are sworn to confront. In January 2023, Brian Cohee Jr. stood trial in Mesa County. The prosecution painted him as a cold, calculated killer, while the defense argued he was a deeply disturbed young man, lost in violent fantasy. The jury faced a haunting question: was this madness or pure evil? After nearly 3 weeks of harrowing testimony, gruesome evidence, and conflicting expert opinions, the case was handed over to the jury. 12 ordinary citizens from Mesa County were now tasked with an extraordinary burden. They had to retreat into a small room and make a decision that would reverberate through countless lives. Their job was not to determine if Brian Cohee Jr. had killed Frank Harlan. That fact was undisputed. Their job was to climb inside his mind and decide if he was legally sane at the moment he committed the crime. They had to weigh the defense's portrait of a broken, delusional mind against the prosecution's narrative of a cold, calculating psychopath. The jurors had been subjected to a torrent of disturbing information. They had seen the photographs of the dismembered body. They had listened to the killer's own voice narrating the murder. They had heard psychologists from both sides offer confident yet completely contradictory assessments of his mental state. They were asked to navigate the complex legal definitions of insanity and to apply them to a set of facts that seemed to defy all human comprehension. The weight of this responsibility was immense. The fate of Brian Cohee Jr. and the community's sense of justice rested entirely on their shoulders. Inside the deliberation room, the jurors sifted through the evidence. They likely re-examined the timeline, the nature of the planning, and the chilling attempts at concealment. The prosecution's argument that a person who tries to hide a crime inherently knows that the crime is wrong must have loomed large. Brian's actions after the murder, cleaning the scene, hiding the body parts, and lying to his parents, were powerful indicators of a consciousness of guilt. These were not the actions of a person lost in a fantasy world, but of a criminal trying to cover his tracks. The evidence of his lucidity and calculation was overwhelming. The public and the legal teams braced for what could have been a long, drawn-out deliberation. But the jury's decision came with surprising speed. After only a few hours of discussion, they sent a note to the judge. They had reached a verdict. The swiftness of their decision sent a clear signal. The jury had not been swayed by the complex and often conflicting psychological testimony. They had looked at the hard facts of the case and had come to a clear, unambiguous conclusion. The community held its breath as the court reassembled to hear the outcome of their solemn duty. On February 16, 2023, Brian Cohee Jr. was led into court to hear his fate. The jury found him guilty of first-degree murder, rejecting his insanity defense. The judge sentenced Brian to life in prison without parole. The court remembered Frank Harlan, a gentle soul whose life was senselessly stolen. Brian's name joined the list of Colorado's most infamous killers. In the time since Brian Cohee Jr.'s conviction and sentencing, the case has continued to resonate far beyond Grand Junction. It has become a subject of intense fascination and study within true crime communities, featured in podcasts, documentaries, and online forums. The chilling details, the thrill kill motive, the gruesome dismemberment, the killer's own audio narration, have cemented its place as one of the most disturbing cases of the modern era. It serves as a stark case study in psychopathy, forensic investigation, and the terrifying potential for violence that can hide in plain sight, making it a topic of both morbid curiosity and serious academic discussion. The case has also had a lasting positive impact on advocacy for the homeless in the Grand Junction area. The murder of Frank Harlan brought the vulnerability of this population into sharp focus, galvanizing local organizations and community members. There has been a renewed push for resources, including safer shelters and more robust mental health outreach programs. Frank's tragic death, while senseless, was not entirely in vain. It forced a conversation and spurred action, creating a legacy of increased awareness and compassion for those who, like him, live on the margins of society. His name is now remembered not just as a victim, but as a catalyst for change. For the Cohee family, the aftermath is a life sentence of a different kind. They continue to grapple with the devastating reality of their son's actions and the role they had to play in bringing him to justice. Their story is a complex and tragic one, highlighting the collateral damage of violent crime. They are often cited as examples of incredible moral courage, but they are also a family shattered by grief and public scrutiny. Their journey underscores the painful truth that the ripples of a single horrific act can spread to devastate the lives of everyone it touches, including the family of the perpetrator. Today, the case of Brian Cohee Jr. stands as a chilling monument in the landscape of American crime. It is a story about the failure to see the darkness gathering behind a young man's eyes. It is a story about the profound importance of digital forensics in solving modern crimes. And it is a story about a community's loss of innocence and its struggle to find meaning and justice in the face of unimaginable horror. The legal proceedings are over, but the questions and the chilling legacy of the case endure, a permanent reminder of the day a teenager's dark fantasy became a city's waking nightmare. The story of Brian Cohee Jr. is a chilling reminder that darkness can hide behind the most ordinary facades. In a quiet suburban bedroom, a young man's obsession with death led to the tragic murder of Frank Harlan, a vulnerable soul living on the fringes. This case forces us to confront unsettling truths about evil, community, and the fragility of the human psyche. The scars left behind serve as a haunting reflection of darkness in our midst. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Brian Cohee Jr.'s isolation, obsession with death, and secret online life were troubling, but not clear warnings at the time. Sometimes the signs are only obvious in hindsight. We're left with a haunting truth: some darkness may be impossible to foresee or stop. The story of Brian Cohee Jr. and Frank Harlan is a stark reminder. We must be vigilant for signs of distress, both online and offline, and compassionate toward those most vulnerable. By fostering open conversations, supporting the marginalized, and strengthening our social safety nets, we can help prevent tragedy. It's a difficult balance, but one we are morally obligated to pursue.